Welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Livermore Valley, and welcome to ToutSuite.com. ToutSuite on the road. We're very proud to be hosting another great ToutSuite show from the Livermore Valley. My name is Steven Mirassou, and I'm joined by Collin Cranor of Nottingham, Cellars, Mark Clarin of McGrail Vineyards here in the Valley. We're going to talk to you today about something that's very near and dear to our heart, and that's harvest time. You can smell it. You can probably smell it from your TV screen right now. The smell of grapes being picked. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. We're going to talk about all the things that harvest means to us, some of the problems we've had in the cellar during harvest time. The successes, I think, outweigh the failures a little bit anyway, right?
Let's hope, yeah.
And we're talking about the 14 vintage and all the things that make this business a spectacular business. We're joined by you can hear them, a very enthusiastic live audience. Thank you all for being here in Livermore, joining us at Steven Kent Winery. Wave. Awesome. We saw a wave here. It was beautiful. I want to thank everybody who's supported the wineries here in Livermore Valley. It's a spectacular place if you haven't been here, and we'll talk more about what that means as we go along. Please, by all means, send us your questions. The more questions you send, the less you have to hear me talk, and we'll all have more fun, I think. So if you have any questions about harvest, what we're doing, why we do it, the problems that you see us having because of the choices we've made, please let us know. We'll be happy to address everything that we can in this next 45 minutes. So let's hop into it, guys.
Perfect.
We're going to be tasting some wines as we go along, just sort of informally. It makes it easier for us to talk the more alcohol we have. There's a cheese plate with some gorgeous cheese that Jennifer from Steven Kent Winery put together behind you. Come on a weekend sometime, and you can join us with the cheese as well here in Livermore. Harvest, guys, right?
Yep.
Yes.
We're picking tomorrow Sauvignon Blanc. You picked today, Mark, right?
Correct.
What did you get?
Chardonnay, one of the vineyards locally here in the Livermore Valley, the De Mayo vineyard. Part of that vineyard is a little challenged, and it struggles a little bit, and the rest of the vineyard is really good, but the bricks were up, 23.5 bricks. The flavors are there, and it's an early vintage, but super excited about it.
Very cool. And Collin, you've gotten some stuff off already too.
Yeah, I've got 2 lots in it so far. Actually, Chardonnay as well, right here in Livermore Valley, Fraser Howard Vineyard. I also that Chardonnay went dry today, so I picked it 2 Fridays ago. Wow. So I'm gonna.
I think you were the first in the valley to pick, as far as I remember.
I think there was one pick for sparkling right before me. So yeah, it's always an early vineyard.
Oh, that's
it's 32 days before last year. Last year was early, so historically, I guess this time next year I'll have wine in by July 1st. So, yeah.
With global warming, we're picking in May.
Exactly.
Down the road here.
2 vintages a year.
Exactly. So, we'll talk more about what harvest actually means from a practical standpoint and from the winery standpoint. But what does it mean emotionally to you guys? Mark, you've been doing this for a while, right? This is like your 4th or 5th vintage, I think? Something like that?
Something like that.
What does this time of year mean to you?
Great question. For me, it's my favorite time of the year. First of all, the weather's pretty nice. I love living in the East Bay area, and where it's warm in the day and cool at night, and that's really good for grapes as well. But actually, harvesting grapes is, sort of the final moment. You spend the whole year manipulating the vineyard. You finally get to the very end, time to pick. You agonize over the picking decision, and voila, you pick it. And once you pick it, you got to go with it, And
right.
but
hard to glue the grapes back on.
It really, the vines don't like that. But it's really pretty cool because it's sort of once you get those grapes picked and you get your fermenters going, and there's no better feeling.
That's very cool. One thing that resonates, and obviously maybe not nobody, most people in the larger world don't know this, but I think of harvest as sort of renewal, right? It's the start of it's the end of certain part of what we do and the beginning of that next part of what we do. You just had a grandchild in the last week or so, right? So
yes,
there's a couple of lives being born here,
right?
And that resonates a lot with me when we're thinking about, what what these new wines are going to be like 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road when they're finally released to people. They're in their absolute infancy now. And we help to shape and educate and guide them, as it were.
Absolutely.
And hopefully they're law-abiding citizens. Not straight down the road necessarily, but mostly law-abiding citizens by the time that they're released. So congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
Collin, you're newer at this.
Yes.
So have you formed any kind of emotional connection to this time of year? What's it like for you?
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, it's kind of the beginning. You kind of wait all year for it. Harvest really starts like a couple weeks after the last harvest ends because you're thinking about pruning and what's going to happen and weather for the year. So it's like this cyclical thing that you just get in touch with the year. And so this time of year is just, it's really cool. You know, you pull out the equipment, the first fruit comes in, you kind of run through the motions a little bit slower, get back into, okay, how do I do this? How do I do that? And it's the best. I mean, it's the one time a year where, for 4 months straight, you're like putting in just as much mental and physical energy into it. And at the end of the day, like you sit back and look and you see all these different barrels and all these different, different programs and all the things you did for harvest. And it's just, it's great. There's nothing better.
So that kind of leads me into one of the questions
Except for the work part.
Except for the work part. That's why you have cellar rats, right? You have to
I
correct.
wish, yeah.
Let's see, guys.
Yeah, there you go.
This is my cellar rat.
So one of the things that we're going to be talking about are a couple of specific wines that we brought, and I've been on ToutSuite a number of times talking about Livermore Valley and about Livermore Valley's long history with Bordeaux varieties, and I think that this area, and I know that you guys agree with me, is really one of the great areas in the world for growing Bordeaux varieties. That there's a marketing war that we have not yet really even begun to fight in, but from a viticultural standpoint, this area is as capable of producing world-class Bordeaux varieties as any. Mm-hmm. Concur?
I totally agree.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here if I didn't think so.
Good. So we're going to be tasting some wines, 3 different Bordeaux varieties, in fact, over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, and talking a little bit about what these wines are showing. They're very young wines, but I think that for those who haven't heard anyone from Livermore talk about Bordeaux and the varieties that are famous there, and I think will be more and more famous from Livermore, pay attention. We'll be talking hopefully something valuable and useful for you to listen to. We have our first question.
Yeah, you made the comment of the early harvest this year, and it was early last year. How long have you known it's going to be an early harvest? What drives that? And is there any correlation between how early the harvest is and the quality of the wine that you get out?
Great question. Question about the earliness of the harvest. Mark, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. So last year I thought it'd be a good idea that I wanted to kind of get done early this year because I have some vacation scheduled. No,
that drives everything, frankly.
The reality is weather drives it, and so we had a very warm spring. Reasonably warm winter, if you recall, but a warm spring, and then we've had a fairly warm summer, and couple that with a little bit reduced yield in the vineyard this year. So yields are down. When the yields are down, it's easier to ripen fruit, and then couple that with the early bud break and the early little warmer year. We're picking early. That being said, I've seen it before where there'll still be fruit hanging out there late October, like always, if the vineyard has a lot of fruit hanging on it.
There's a very well kind of chronicled calendar for bud break, for when veraison starts, and when you're done with veraison, and when harvest time happens. So sort of in response to when do you know it's going to be an early harvest, you kind of know when things are starting to accelerate early on in the season, like they did this year. And what tends to happen, it's funny how many years things seem to be early, and they kind of catch up to be where they always are. But I think this year, the last vineyard really to get ripe in the Livermore Valley is the Gilmedi Vineyard, which is in the far sort of eastern foothills here in Livermore, and it tends to start late, tends to finish late. We've been picking almost at Thanksgiving time in various vintages. This year, I think we'll be done by the end of October, first couple of days of November, if things continue to go the way that they're going now. The weather's been great. You know, we're expecting mid 80 temperatures for this week, which is about perfect for grapes. Great for people, great for grapes. And given, I think, what we've seen so far from what you've pulled in, what we're going to pull in tomorrow with Sauvignon Blanc, and kind of what we're tasting, it should be another great harvest in terms of quality. Yield's lower than last year, but I think still slightly above average for Livermore Valley. So there's going to be a lot of fruit still, I think. So we're going to go ahead and pour some Petit Verdot around. This is 2012 Nottingham Cellars Petit Verdot.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about it.
So this is Nottingham Cellars' first varietal Petit Verdot varietal offering. We sourced the fruit from Gilmedi Vineyard. Steven knows the Gilmedi Vineyard. It's his estate. We started getting fruit for blending purposes in 2008, but never had enough to do a varietal offering. So 2012 marks the first year that I both had the volume and the quality to bottle a Petit Verdot on its own. Great wine. Interesting that we're starting with this because it's pretty big and black and viscous, but it is the current release. So we're going to start with that.
Wine of the group,
exactly. So I love it. I was inspired by some of the petites I had here in Livermore Valley. Your 07 was a killer wine.
Thank you.
And
what about the 2012 vintage? How did you feel about that?
2012 vintage was great. Between the Bordeaux and the Rhone stuff, it's the first vintage that I could say across the board I hit pretty much all the profiles I wanted to hit. Very happy with the wines that are going to be coming out over the next couple of years. So yeah.
How happy are you with 12 after 11?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, we had 10 and 11.
Reasonably.
No, so personally, I mean, I started really getting into this in 2009, which I think was a great vintage here in Livermore Valley. Things were good. I didn't have any data before that, so that's what I know is like my benchmark.
You've had one tough vintage so far.
And then, well, I've had 10 and 11. So I had 9, and then 10 and 11, which were I kind of like, should I be doing this? And then 12 came along, and things went great. And then we had 13, which if you blew it, you should be making beer.
Right.
So, and now we're looking at a third solid vintage here in a row, and it's kind of unusual. So it's pretty cool.
You can dump behind you.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure it's gone.
Thank you.
Here you go, buddy. We're good to go.
So
thank you.
Thank you, Tarek, for the question, by the way, and kind of sort of leapfrogging on that question. When do you know it's a good year?
When the wines are in the barrel, and I don't know.
Do you know that early? When the wine's in the barrel? When you first get stuff in the barrel?
I think when you have tremendous potential, and then after that, at that point, it's seeing it through. So utilizing your barrels and all your components when you're blending properly, is kind of the name of the game. So I guess you don't know until the wines are sold out. Really.
then you know.
That's a good story.
Pretty good. What about you, Mark?
Well, I feel like I generally know whether or not it's going to be an exceptional vineyard. That's mine. But the exceptional vintage, like this year, I'm very bullish on 2014, as I was with 2013 and 2012. In recent history, 10 and 11 were challenging years, but I think I know right away. But the other part of the vintage is actually, okay, you grow the grapes, but now I pick the grapes and I get them into a fermenter, and if you don't manage that part right, you can have a disastrous vintage even in a wonderful year with wonderful grapes. And so I always say, start with good grapes and don't mess it up.
Don't screw it up in the summer. Exactly. Exactly. Mother Nature can only do so much.
All right. But I like Collins, once it's out the door sold, that's a good vintage.
Yes, indeed. The accountants think so anyway.
Absolutely.
So, what are we supposed to be tasting in this?
Oh man.
What is it about Petit Verdot that you like as a variety?
Well, when I used to use it just primarily for blending, I just really like the fruit intensity, the mid palate density. Drives some big black and blue fruit across the palate. It's usually fairly tannic, bordering on that rustic, gritty kind of feel to the mouth. The wine's finish, and that's not just the wines we're fermenting and making. I'd say Petit Verdot in Livermore Valley has really been a winner across the board. Several producers.
I think it's a good observation, and I think that what it kind of shows is that even though this is an old-time growing region, I think it's really kind of going through a renaissance in terms of quality. There are 52 wineries in Livermore, again, at least 52. Same number of wineries that were here before Prohibition. And this was really the first great wine region in California in the 1880s, early on in history. First international gold medal, all the history that we know about Livermore Valley's quality. One of the things that really interests me, and I think Petit Verdot is a great example of that, is that this is not your father's appellation or your grandfather's appellation. Petit Verdot is a blending grape. Why would you make a varietal wine out of a blending grape? You would do it because it grows really well in Livermore Valley, and you can make a whole wine. You can make a wine that has a beginning and a middle and an end, that has a very unique varietal signature to it, right? That's got something that's going to interest you early on and something that will age out as well and become more complex. And our first vintage at Steven Kent was 2006, Petit Verdot from Gilmedi. And I don't know that there was a varietal really PV prior to that or not, but the vineyard does a really good job with it, and the people who are using the fruit now are doing a great job with it as well. And it's exciting to see this new appellation, as it were, grabbing onto varieties that haven't gotten any kind of attention as a varietal offering.
Right.
And I think we're seeing that with Cabernet Franc here in the valley. We're seeing it with other things too.
Right.
And you seeing the same thing,
Well,
Mark?
I do, but I feel like we as a wine community are sort of, as part of the Renaissance, are better understanding what, first of all, somebody planted Petit Verdot, right? We didn't have Petit Verdot in Livermore 30 years ago. So somebody planted it, and now we have it. Actually, thank you.
You're welcome.
So you got that piece, and but I think we're sort of, as we grow up, we get a little geekier. We learn more about wine. The more you learn about wine, the less you know. So, we're experimenting with new varieties, and it's a blending variety in Bordeaux. That doesn't mean it has to be a blending variety here. So, and I think if the
this
wine
is in Bordeaux,
right, exactly.
It's Livermore Valley. So
and if the wine is good, then we should drink it.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm brilliant.
Truer words were never said. I think that there's wine appellations, winemakers, winery owners are always trying to find something that's theirs, right? Cabernet is Napa Valley's. No one in California probably is going to supplant Napa Valley in terms of being the Cabernet Sauvignon center of California. And the Petit Verdot or Cabernet...
You mean besides Bordeaux?
Besides Bordeaux, in the U.S., in California.
Okay.
But there are other varieties that we have the potential of introducing people to that could end up making a little niche for ourselves. I mean, obviously, we love what we do. We wouldn't spend as much time in the cellars as we do if we didn't love it. Absolutely, passionate, adore what we do. But we do have to make a living at the end too, right? So the fact that we can pick something that works really well here, and make it our own is an important consideration as well. We have another question. Thank you.
No problem.
Remember,
We always hear that Petit Syrah is the best varietal in Livermore. What do you guys think is the best varietal in Livermore, and why?
Okay, she's fired. I'm kidding.
So what is the best variety in Livermore? Petit Syrah has a long history in Livermore.
Definitely, yeah.
And a very successful history in Livermore Valley.
As does Sauvignon Blanc.
As does Sauvignon Blanc, even longer.
Yeah.
Collin, do you have an answer?
It's a loaded question. So
Future fruit sources might
sure.
might balance
I know.
out
Yeah, I
got
to think about this here. the cool thing about Livermore Valley, I'm gonna go right to the good stuff here. We have a pretty diverse set of microclimates, and a lot of different things can grow well here. That all said, I think we make some pretty good Cabernet Sauvignon and Bordeaux style wines here in Livermore Valley.
Good answer. Good answer.
You know, it's different than Napa. I'm not going to go into the details of why or how, but it's what our region is, you know, and it just I think the wines are that we're making. I think the wines you guys are making specifically are showing really good in the big wine world outside of Livermore Valley. So, gosh, it's tough to say, but Cabernet is kind of king for me. So,
interesting answer.
Well, I sort of agree. Although I mean, I do respect and recognize and bow to the history of the Livermore Valley and Petite Sirah in particular, as it relates. But I do think that we can grow pretty much anything in Livermore wine grape wise, with the exception of possibly some really of the cooler climate grapes. But the Mediterranean region, if we really wanted to get into it, Italian varieties, Spanish varieties, Portuguese varieties, Eastern Europe, Georgia, Yugoslavia, whatever grows well in those areas, I think grows well in Livermore. Riesling, Alsatian wines, maybe not, but, we don't speak that language anyway.
Good point. I want to follow up on that in a second, but we have another audience member.
Hello.
State your name.
June Mirassou.
Repeat after me.
No relation. No. So I'm curious about something. You said earlier that Petit Verdot stands up on its own because it tells a story, it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I've heard you talk about that in the past about wines, about in those terms and that terminology, like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I just was interested in you expanding on that. What does that mean for someone tasting the wines? That it has a beginning, it has a story, it has a beginning, middle, and end.
Okay, I'll tell you
Good
what
question.
I think I get from this wine, beginning, middle, and end, the total story.
Well, I can only talk about the end.
It was a really good end. It was a happy ending, as it were.
When I'm making Petit Verdot, I try to flirt that line of pretty and rustic. So when you're swirling the wine, sniffing, you're getting the aromatics. You get something a little bit on the prettier side, a little more feminine. But as the wine enters, it's definitely higher tuned acid, but there's a good rush of fruit density, and the wine finishes with some solid tannin and good acid to it as well. So to me, it's the beginning is, taking a sniff, getting a good whiff of what's going on, and then tasting the wine, the front palate, it's, definitely fruit driven. And then if you just go across the mid, definitely got some nice density to it. And as the wine finishes, it lingers, and we've got some good tannin and acid. So,
do you have an expectation for the lifespan of this wine?
With the tannin structure and the acid, and just knowing me where pH and some of the more technical things are, I think the wine should lay down for a long time. We just bottled it in late May or early June, and so the wine probably won't be released till this winter. So that all said, I think it's gonna hold on, should hang on for a while.
That being said, I mean, I totally agree, but I also think, I totally agree this wine's going to, age well. But I also, I mentioned to you I had a 2010 Cab Franc from, Steven Kent last night. It was delicious, and I look forward to this wine like 2 or 3, years from now. I think it's really going to be in the sweet spot.
It's funny. I and this isn't on my cheat sheet, so I'm going off the script here.
Thank you.
So this is the whole paradigm about sort of older and aged wines, and a wine's got to be, it's got to be able to last for 10 or 15 or 20 years, or it's not a wine of quality kind of thing. It's definitely not a California paradigm. It's a Bordeaux paradigm in a lot of ways. I think one thing that needs to be said about a wine like this is it's really delicious right now.
Yeah,
true.
This wine hasn't even been released yet, and it's already a delicious wine.
Thank you.
And sometimes people get too caught up in this idea, well, I've got to lay this wine down for 5 years because the winemaker said it, or the expectation with a big red is X.
Yeah.
You know what? You lose a lot of the hedonistic kind of, youthful exuberance of wines, which are really fun. That's a great, fun part of wine drinking, right?
Sure.
The intellectual part of it, I think, comes with age, and you get less fruit, you get a mellower wine, and structurally the wines are different, that sort of thing. But, don't let wines get too old.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee about tomorrow, right?
I like
Tuesday's a very nice day to drink, right?
So.
Yes, nice day to drink. Okay, right there. Cabernet Franc next. So we're gonna pour some Cab Franc, 2013. So Collin's wine was 2012 vintage. 13 vintage of Cab Franc from Steven Kent Winery. Just pulled a barrel sample today, in fact. Curious to get your opinion about this wine. Cabernet Franc, one of my current obsessions. A grape, I think, that grows extraordinarily well here in Livermore as well. We'll get to this wine in a second, but getting back to harvest questions. So, what is it what is it that people don't know about harvest out there? What's the biggest challenge? You got the fruit in.
Oh no, that's not the biggest challenge.
No.
I think
What's the biggest challenge?
For me, it's organizing the pick.
Yeah.
Getting the pick, or getting enough people to pick your grapes, because I think all of us we hand pick fruit, and we have lots of friends. They're here, but we require about 5 times as many to help us get the fruit off in a timely manner. So it's really critical when we're making picking decisions to get the fruit off in a day or 2 days, not over the course of 2 weeks. If 2 weeks, we can do it on the weekends, right? But for me, that's the biggest challenge.
Is organizing the pick.
I think for me, it's just establishing the flow of all the different varieties coming in and different sites and all the things. So not so much organizing the picks as organizing the vintage. So, obviously we have Chardonnay, and this is easy. I've got 1 ferment going, 1 tank. Now it's in barrels. It's going back to tank. Easy, no big deal. But as we get later into the harvest, there's some things that we want to let hang a little bit longer, but maybe we should pick them now because other things are looming, and you've only got so much year left. So just keeping the fermenters filled, but still maintaining quality and picking when you want. So it requires some foresight, and it requires foresight really in vineyard decisions about irrigation and crop size and breaking down. If you have a big vineyard, and your facility can't handle that.
It sound like real work. Where's all the romance? Where's all the romance of the wine?
And then when it comes
right
in, we
here,
gently
baby.
punch it down.
This 45 minutes is about it. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Mark, this is vintage number what for you?
Thanks for asking. 35.
35.
Wow, congratulations.
Wow.
Let's give it up.
Congratulations. That's awesome. And your first pick was here in Livermore?
Yep.
So what led you into the wine business?
Money.
That and a total lack
Have
of
you found
understanding
it yet?
about money. Right?
Yeah. I thought I was going to get rich. And then I realized, the old joke is true. You want to make a small fortune, you start with a large one.
Hi, guys.
Yeah.
Hey,
Is
Melody.
winemaking more art, science, or luck?
No luck involved.
It's all skill, right?
All skill. I think it's kind of just like a good wine, it's all about balance. So understanding, you want to put your own twist on things. You want to have your own style, but you still got to play by the rules. So not cheating the system is the primary thing. Not taking shortcuts and not doing things because they require more time or more effort or more energy. So I don't know. I think it's both. We spend a lot of time in lab and doing some analysis. Sometimes not. Sometimes too much, in my opinion. A lot of the times, the best wines are made when you just taste and smell and get in there, and you just you kind of do what's right.
You're learning, Grasshopper. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's art.
That's it? Period?
For once, I'm going to say one thing. It's ours.
This is the question I actually expected some expounding on.
Oh, okay.
No, that's you're
you
done.
need me to fill
you're
some
done.
time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stretch. That's a great question, Melody. I think that when Collin and Mark were talking about the challenges of sort of organizing the vineyard picks and the vineyard year, that's building a foundation for yourself from an organizational standpoint is hugely important in terms of allowing you to be open to the magic that happens in every fermenter. 2013 was a great vintage. It was a perfect year. The quality of the fruit was amazing. We had plenty of it. But still, as Mark alluded to, you can mess these things up. But if you have a plan and a vision for what it is you're really trying to make as a winemaker, what you want to be able to give as a gift to the wine drinking world, and you're careful about following that and planning for it early, and then also managing for potential problems, the chances of you winding up with something successful, I think, is far greater than it would be if you just sort of tossed everything against the wall and said, I'm an artist. F it, I'm an artist, as someone once said that I know. So you need to be careful. You need to be organized and all these sorts of things, but you also need to know that not everything's going to be perfect. And sometimes, perfection lies in those things, those mistakes that were kind of reclaimed, I think. And being open to the myriad things that happen when wine goes from grape juice through this miracle of fermentation to this finished product 3 years down the road. There's so many things that can happen. And they're more positive the more organized you are and the more thoughtful you are about what it is you're trying to accomplish, I think. So the answer is D. All of the above, I think, right?
And I totally agree. I mean, I without science, if you don't have a little bit of, if you don't understand the science of winemaking, you're in trouble.
Sure.
You're in trouble. But, it is fun to just pretend.
Well, it's like an artist not understanding whatever medium he's using.
Right.
Not understanding how to use the canvas or different types of paint.
Right.
So, got to give yourself a chance to express that art. So,
Patty.
Another question, Patty.
So, a neighbor planted the very first Cabernet Franc in this valley in 1985 down at the Charles Wetmore Vineyard.
Beautiful.
Big surprise that they even planted it. It was only, I think, an acre and a half, Mark, at the time.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. So, anyway, getting back to this is so delicious.
Thank you.
And barrel sample and all, oh my gosh, I'm so glad we have it here in this valley.
Thank you
thought
very
I'd give
much.
you that.
Thank you very much. It's awesome. Nice.
tell us about the
That's
wine.
how you ask a question.
That's just a statement. It's a bit of a way.
I know.
Come on up. Thank you, Patty.
Hey guys.
Hey.
A wise man once told me if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So how are you taking what you learned from last harvest and improving upon your methods? What are you doing differently for this upcoming harvest?
Going on
Good
vacation.
question. Letting the. That's a great question. Mark?
All right. So the good news is every vintage is different. The bad news is every vintage is different. But, I think you're right. I mean, personally, I'm always trying to learn more about how to grow a better vine, how to grow better grapes, how to make a better fermentation, how to make sure my barrels are, good and, or better. That being said, better is the enemy of good. So you have to remember that if you're doing something and it turns out well, you want to repeat it as often as you can.
Charlie, good question, by the way. I think one thing is, kind of touching on what the last answer, you build a foundation for yourself, kind of a knowledge base of what worked for you in the past, given certain conditions. And I think that with Collin and Mark being good friends of mine, and we talk a lot about wine and what we're doing in the cellar, constant experimentation, I think, is an important part of growing. Important part of learning, of stretching the envelope, as it were. Whether that means new yeasts that you want to use, new barrels that you want to use, pick dates that are different, more extended maceration, less extended maceration, different fermentation temperatures. All these things will come into play, I think, as you go through a harvest. Again, you have a plan to begin with, and the plan gives you a real solid foundation for what it is that you're going to do, and also I think leaves you some opportunity for that experimentation. For saying, man, you know what, that first pick of Cabernet Franc was great. Maybe I wanted a little bit more sugar, a little bit more higher alcohol down the road. I'm going to wait for another 5 days or so. I'm going to do something a little bit different with that next, couple of tons or whatever. We try to leave ourselves open for that during the course of the harvest year, so that each year we learn more about what it is we're doing, and we don't rely only on trying to recreate past successes, quote unquote, whatever that is. If you're not pushing forward, as you said, you're sort of staying the same, or you're failing. At the same point, craziness is probably not the best virtue for this kind of business. You ultimately have any more crazy than we already are. There are a bunch of people out there to please. We're making wine for people who love wine. We're making too much wine for us to drink by ourselves. We try really hard, but we can't do it, I don't think. So it's constantly looking at small tweaks. Get a good balance, and then tweak a little bit. You don't have to recreate the wheel every time you go into harvest, I think. Collin, you anything to add?
Yeah, so you said 35 vintages. I'm 8 in. So for me, I'm still gathering that data. I'm still trying to figure out what's what, figure out what vineyards work best, what different yeasts with different vineyards, what different barrels with different yeasts with different vineyards, fermentation temperatures, right, fermentation vessels, all those different things. That all said, the first 5 years, it was all an experiment for the most part. Obviously some things were your kind of core projects. But as I've grown, I'm, right now, like this last 2 years, I've really kind of I feel like I'm doing less experimenting and more honing in on what have been my successes. I'm still experimenting a lot. I'm always adding a new barrel, new yeast strain.
Right.
Oh, that's like 10% of the production now, as opposed to 50, 60%.
Right.
So now that I kind of have my core sites, knowing what pick dates I want, knowing what yeasts have worked well, now it's just honing in on those things and, eliminating different X factors that have been not detrimental. It was great to learn from them, but they aren't as good as maybe something else over here. So doing more of the something else over here that's better, and less, just cutting out kind of the stuff that is, I guess, successful and is good stuff, but it's not as good as some of the other things that are going on.
Failures aren't bad.
Yeah.
I mean, failures help you learn, obviously. And
I
think that the one, there's a relatively long cycle between fermentations, right, and the finished product and the wines that you taste. Hopefully the failures never get as far as that, right? We've dumped them down the drain, or they've gone into a larger blend, or what have you. But I embrace the idea that I'm going to work on the edge a little bit, and if something doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I've learned it doesn't work. You don't know how far the envelope can be pushed until you push it.
Sure.
That's true. But also you have to be careful, because you have to balance that with
Indeed.
the economics of that. So if
Indeed.
you have, if you have a lot of money, you'll end up with not a lot of money if you get into this.
You seem to be pretty. Is that a problem?
No,
Anything on your
are you
mind
kidding?
right now?
I've got the best life ever that I know of.
So let's move on. Let's move on to the Cabernet from McGrail. But just a quick word on the Cabernet Franc.
Yes.
Floral notes, violet, racy acid, kind of mid-palate. I think, Mark, tell us about your Cabernet.
So Cabernet Sauvignon, this is 2013 Cabernet Sauvignon. And last year I decided, speaking of experiment, and trying to get better, I utilized a different irrigation strategy. And the idea was to grow more intense fruit, hopefully more intense berries, smaller berries, maybe less clusters, and then we ended up interestingly enough, we ended up with the same amount of tonnage from our 16-acre property in 2013 as we did in 2012. But I'm as good as 2012 was, and I'm bullish on 2012. I'm really bullish on 2013 a lot. I really think that I was successful at getting a little more intensity of just darker fruit, better fruit flavors, and just more tannin, and just a bigger, bolder wine. And so, of course, I'm repeating that in 2014 in a drought year. So it's been a little bit challenging 2014 because I've had to irrigate more, and it's difficult to manage that. But basically what I did was I didn't irrigate this until July. And I started irrigating in July, and so voila, here we are. Cheers.
Cheers. You know, I think that you are probably the forerunner in terms of structured cab, and specifically tannin levels. You know, this is a beautiful wine, and there's a ton of tannin in this wine, and it's you know, how you're managing your fermentations and what you're doing with pick dates and that sort of thing. I think is really showing beautifully in terms of the structure of the wine.
Thank you.
We used fruit from this vineyard back in 2002 through 06, I think.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And but you've taken that vineyard, you know, way beyond what we ever did with it, I think. And in terms of a boldness, as you're talking about, in terms of an overall structure and an ageability factor, if you're looking at tannin, I think you're really hitting your stride now because there's still a ton of fruit there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's not tannin at, you know, to the detriment of fruit.
Right.
There will be something there to actually enjoy when the wines
they're
soften up.
Right.
You know, 10 years down the road or however long it takes. This is really a beautiful wine.
Thanks.
Well done.
How do you guys like it?
Excellent.
Yeah?
Right.
13, right?
2013, yeah. This will be out in 2 more years.
2 more years.
Barrel
barrel.
sample.
Barrel.
Yeah.
Wow.
2 more years.
Out next week.
No.
When will you release this?
2016. July of 2016.
If you guys, we only have a few minutes left. Does anybody have sort of some final questions from the audience? Anybody have any questions they want to ask? Excellent. Awesome.
I'm Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
I'm interested across the variety. Obviously, I've seen that you go to Lenardi's or you go to the Ritz-Carlton and I get your wine. You go to Handel's and you can get it on tap. I'm not sure the marketing strategy from you, but how do you balance the production, the way that you're going to distribute? I know you guys are doing a lot locally. Obviously, you need to reach a little broader, and I'm not quite certain from McGrail. How do you balance the production versus the marketing and sales to make sure that you get that right balance?
We have another hour, right?
What a great question. Nice job.
That's a great question.
I'm going to give it a 20-second answer here.
All right.
We have basically 5 Cabernets we produce each year. 1846 Cabernet Sauvignon, which is what you have on tap. And it's our By the Glass program wine. Essentially what I'm doing there is it's wines that are produced to be a little more fruit forward and fruit driven, and a little higher tuned acid, less new oak. Intended to be food friendly because they're going to be sold in a restaurant. It's By the Glass stuff, you know, so it's going to pair with food primarily. Up from there, I do some single vineyard Cabernet Sauvignons where I'm trying to just hone in on the distinctions of a couple different grow sites. Those wines tend to spend a little more time in wood. There's some newer barrels. They take a little higher precedence and, you know, a little bit more TLC in terms of getting the pick date, you know, dead on as opposed to some of the higher volume stuff. And then from there we do our Livermore Valley Reserve Cab. Those latter 4 are really primarily done in the tasting room, and then the higher volume stuff is what you're going to see in the broad market. And I think it's actually good that way because those wines represent what Livermore Valley as a whole can do. It's a cuvee of all my different single vineyards essentially, and the wines are, you know, really showing good. So
That was a 20-second response.
sorry, I tried.
Mark?
So, McGrail Vineyards is, you know, we're basically our whole, the beginning was Cabernet Sauvignon, with, you know, and really thanks to Steven for helping us establish the brand McGrail Vineyard, and then we've expanded, beyond that. But we're really a club-based wine company, and we have a property on Greenville Road, and people come and taste. They join the club. We have a nice, we have a nice place, just like Steven does, and people come and visit, and we're really direct to consumer. How do we manage production? It's very tricky, because a couple of years ago we were running short on wine. This year I feel like we're right on the money, which scares me, because we're trying to grow a little bit at a time. So we've been making a little bit more wine every year, and but I think for now that's our goal is just to sell primarily direct to consumer, and come see us and hang out.
We love Livermore Valley. It's been our home for years and years and years, and we will be here hopefully forever. We do a couple different tiers, Ritz-Carlton and various other things, but high-end Cabernet, lineage, single vineyard Cabernets from the Valley is what we're actually after. That's the modus operandi for Steven Kent, and will continue to be what we do down the road. Throw in some Cabernet Franc and Petit Verdot, and that's kind of the portfolio for us. We love having people come to Livermore. We love being able to show off this incredible valley. It's absolutely gorgeous. We wish you could all be here right now. It's a beautiful day today, and there are many, many more beautiful days to come here in the valley. We want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We want to thank our live studio audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. I want to thank Collin Cranor from Nottingham Cellars and Mark Clarin from McGrail Vineyards, two of the top producers here in Livermore Valley. I want to thank Susan and Didier from ToutSuite.com for joining us here in the Valley. I want to thank you two for joining us. We appreciate being able to share our passion with you. And you can go online and find our websites and the various social media things. If you have questions that you want to ask us, we'll be happy to answer. But even more importantly, come and taste what we have to offer. Come to Livermore. Go downtown, go to the amazing restaurants that are there, have a lot of fun in the valley. This really is the place to be. It's a cool spot, and we're so happy to have you here. ToutSuite.com. Thank you all for joining us. And StevenKent.com. Also, thank you very much. All right. Thanks, guys.